Welcome back to the homestead, everyone. So today's project is part 2 of ball joints. We're putting our ball joints in. We're going to put our front end back together, start hooking our steering back up. We're just going to see how far we get before we have to start another video. So we've been to the auto parts store. We've got our Moog ball joints. We really like Moog for a couple reasons. They do last very well and they're guaranteed for life. So keep your receipt. We're using the ball joint press to put this back together with. And we are, just going to have at this here. You have to think about the direction things go in and how your ball joint press is going to work. So in this case, we're going to put the top one in first. And something new, the grease fitting now is on the side of the ball joint so it doesn't hit the U-joint. So you want to sort of think about where you're going to put that. And I'm going to aim mine right back about here, like that, so that I can get to that to grease it in the future. So then we're going to get our press and a bunch of other pieces. We're going to get this piece up here. We're going to stick our press in through that hole, like that. We're going to hold that. Then we're going to take this thing. And this is just an old socket I have laying around, but it works well to get the ball joint started. You actually have to start it with this one because the press is not deep enough to do all of them. So then we're going to just fire up the impact and we're going to ooga-dooger it in. Not sure we're going to accomplish our goal here today with these snap ring pliers. Maybe. I'll be happy to know I did order a new set though. I'm going to read up real quick on the torquing instructions and we'll be right back. Alright, so we've got our ball joints back in, we got our dust seals on, got our nuts in our hand. I'd make a joke about that, but I probably shouldn't. So we're going to put these in here. And I'm going to start both nuts. And there's a top and a bottom to this one. You'll see it's got some stamps in it to kind of lock it. So that's the top. So I'm going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to start that one in there. And then we're going to st And then we're going to go find our tools and snug those up. And the way you're supposed to do this is torque the bottom one to 70 foot-pounds, or pound-feet, how do you say that? And then the top one to 100. And sometimes if you can't get past that lock, you may have to put a screwdriver in it, you may have to put a jack on it like that. Sometimes I find tightening the top one down a little bit will actually bring the bottom one up enough so it binds. The problem is we've hit the locks on the nut, and as such it's turning the whole stud down the ball joint. But you see, if we put some pressure on this one, that pulled that one up a lot. I'm going to grab my socket again. There we go. Now we'll get the torque wrench. So that's 70. Now we're going to go to 100 on the top one. Maybe. Alright, so we're going to put our steering arm on. You saw us take the other one off. That just goes on there like that. And you want to make sure this surface is clean. You know, no big chunks of anything sitting there. And then you get your tapered cones that you saw us take out. So we'll do the next guy a favor and we'll turn the flats out this way on every one of them. And then we're going to go get a hammer and a little punch, which we just happen to have left over here. Carefully not to mess up the threads. We're going to get those down in there. And we only got to go enough that the nuts will start. Now, Rough Country gave us these. I'm going to open up, look at them, compare them to the factory ones. I'll put just a little bit of Never Seas on there. So you'll see I cleaned this up here, and I've cleaned the spindle up, which I'll show you in a minute. The observant eye will also notice that I didn't change the U-joint, because this one is actually feeling really good. So we're just going to try to get past the seal in there, and into the pumpkin, and there we are. I'm going to pull it back out a little bit, because we have to put a seal on there that we got. Remember we talked about that dust seal being bad, so we got one. It's interesting because the seal itself is part of a kit called the SBK1, I believe it is. And that kit consists of this seal, this little seal in here, the roller bearing that's inside the spindle, and the kit is $12. And I think the seal was $9, Sue says, which I believe I agree. So it's kind of funny that that little rubber seal is almost the same price as the whole kit. So now what we're going to do is never seize everything up, and we're going to put our spindle on, we're going to put our back plate on, and we're going to bolt that back on. So what I like to do is take this. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to go get a dab of grease. Stay right there. I'm putting another layer of grease on that roller bearing inside there. And then I like to take my never seize and right in here, just coat this really good. And that way next time we have to take it apart, it will come apart really easy. It wasn't bad, as you guys saw. It took me a little bit with the chisel and a hammer and a block of hardwood. It's my first day speaking. You have to forgive me. Just something like that, and that way we're in good shape. Put that on there. And then what I like to do is I like to take my hammer and set that down before I get my back plate on there. Being careful not to hit down in here, of course. So there's all my nuts. I'm going to put just a dab on each bolt. Might be time for more never seize. Then I'm going to grab this back plate onto you guys, and we know that our caliper wants to go that way, so we're going to go ahead and put it on with the caliper facing that way. And you'll see the back plate's not actually that bad. The piece that holds the caliper has no rust. The little sheet metal stuff has a little bit of rust, but we're not going to worry about that. That's there really just to keep road grime and stuff from splashing up on the rotor. It still gets on the rotor, so. Alright, so now what we got to do is I got to convince the camera lady that she's got to take the seal and the bearings out of that hub. Now she's going to have to get dirty and wash out those bearings and the races and the hub, and then we'll repack all the bearings. So we're going to bring you back when we got that all done. You guys don't want to watch us wash grease out of bearings. So hold on and we'll be back. Alright, so packing bearings. They make tools for this, but ultimately the goal is to get grease to wedge down in between the cage and the bearing itself, in between all the needles. So I like to just get a big old messy wad on my hand like that and just kind of keep driving the bearing down into my hand like that. And if you look, you'll start to see it come up in there. I just keep going around a little bit. And we did, Sue has cleaned all these bearings up. They actually look really good. So we're just putting them right back in after we repack everything. There's no pitting, there's no discoloration. Then I go the other way, same thing. And yeah, it's messy, but not much about this project isn't, so. Okay, so that bearing is close enough for me. We're going to have Sue tip that hub over right there real quick so we can use up the rest of our grease, and we'll show you what we're going to do here. Alright, so you can see she's cleaned that race and everything down there. So we're just going to pack a bunch of grease in there, what's left in our hand, and we're going to go ahead and put that bearing down in there. And we'll put a bunch more here in a bit. You'll see what we'll do, but we're going to put that in there. That's the inner bearing. And now we're going to clean up a little bit. We're going to put our seal in. And the seal goes flat side out, spring in. And we're going to basically just, because this isn't holding back any oil, we're not putting any silicone on it like we do a lot of the other ones. I'm just going to clean a little bit of that grease off there, get rid of our rag, and we're going to tap that down if we can find our tools. We may have to do a little cleaning tonight. Pretty sure we got there. So we're going to have Sue flip that over, and we'll show you what we're going to do to it next. Alright, so I'm just going to wedge a whole bunch of grease down in there. Not really much to see, but I just want a lot of grease down in there. Now I'm going to go get my bearing, and we're going to put the bearing in, and then we're going to put our nuts and stuff on, and I'll show you how to do that correctly. Not like when we took it apart. You guys didn't get to see when we took it apart, but I'll show you what I'm talking about here when we get to it. So we're going to push that in like that. And now we're going to get rid of our gloves. So there's this spindle wrench that fits these nuts. And what you do is one of these nuts has a little tit on it. That goes in first with the tip pointed out. And then the spindle has a little groove cut in it for that right there. So you put that on your spindle and line it up like that. So that's in the groove and the little tit is in the hole. And then you wind this nut down on as tight as you can. And basically what happens now is this nut can't turn because this washer is caught by the spindle. So when we took it apart, this nut was at least a full turn away from that washer. And this nut was really loose. So, not really sure, but it's kind of in keeping with everything else that we're finding on this truck. One thing we've learned is we're not going to trust that anything is tight. So this part here is a little bit of diligent fiddling because you have to get that tip to line up with the groove. Well, not necessarily line up, but you have to get to line up with one of the holes in that washer when the washer is in the groove. And we'll see if we can show you. It's a little dark in there, but we might be able to get you. And what I like to do on this one, on used bearings, is snug it up tight and back it off just a touch. Like that's tight. And then I can back it off just a whisker. If these are new bearings, you need to be a little more careful about preloading them. Something about like that. And we're going to see if we can find a really messy place to set that. Now, it's because somebody got grease everywhere, but the little groove is right over here on that axle. And we might be able to turn the light on and show you a little better. I'm not sure if that would be helpful or not.
Oh, we had a flashlight right here.
So there's a little groove right over here on that side of the spindle, and the tit is over on that side. So what I have to do is I have to take my washer and I have to put it onto that groove like that and see if it'll line up with that little tit. So I'm going to get a pair of needle nose. If you have a magnet, you can use a little magnet too, if you got one of those little telescoping magnets. But I'm going to put a pair of needle nose on that and walk it into that groove. Just like that. And you'll see it doesn't line up. You see it doesn't come through? So I got to go a little bit more or less. And I can also flip it over because they've purposely made the little tip not line up with a hole. See? That's falling right in the hole. You see right at the tip of my needle nose? You can see the pin in the hole. Now we're going to take our other nut, and there's nothing on this one, so there's no right or wrong on this one. And I'm going to put that in there. And Sue has got the other side all apart, and almost all the parts cleaned, so we can go back together. We did not take the spindle out because we know the U-joint is good. So we stopped at the spindle. So maybe in a minute here we'll take you over there and show you what we mean by the little groove. Heck, we could actually mock it all up over there if we think there's any interest in it. So that's up against my washer. Go and hold it in tight. And just kind of crank it up. There's really nothing trying to turn it anymore, because the only thing we're trying to turn it is your bearing. So now we have to put the hub on. So here's our hub. We've gone ahead and tore that all apart, cleaned it all up, greased it. Get that. Actually, let me get a couple screws. Everything gets really slippery when you cover it with wheel bearing grease. So if you just put a couple screws back in your hub, helps you just get everything lined up, and it'll fall right in place. Then we put the snap ring in here. Screwdriver. Yeah, that one is in place. Now on the axle, we have to put this snap ring on, and I've given up on my snap ring pliers. I broke the tip off on the last one, and my new set won't be here for a few days. So I'm just going to brute force and ignorance this one. But one thing I'll point out is it's not going to lock into anything, because I got to push the axle out. So you reach in behind here, you push that axle out a little bit, and you can finish locking your lock ring in. And we're good. Now we'll put the hub together and make sure the 405 works. There's an O-ring on here that you want to check and make sure it's solid, not ripped. There's no oil in there, but there is grease. So if that O-ring gets bad, you know, that grease will migrate out of there and just make a mess of your rims. And before you tear this apart, you actually want to put it in free, because as you put it in lock, it's going to screw that thing in, you see? And it pushes in on that, which is preloading the spring. And this one really doesn't have a right or wrong way. Some of them have little tabs that go into other places. This one doesn't really matter as long as you line up your holes. I'm going to put a screw in it. I'm going to actually start my screw a little bit before I actually put the hub in. I'm going to pull it in with these two, and then I'll come back and put the rest of my screws in. So after we test this, the only thing we have left to do is put our brake caliper back on. But I'm not going to do that until I get the other side done because I'm all covered in grease. And grease and brakes usually don't go well together. So I'll get the other side put back together and then I'll do the brakes later. The brakes are pretty straightforward. I think you've seen that probably in a bunch of videos already. And tomorrow we have to figure out the steering. That's going to be the next, and what I mean by that is the tie rod end that we showed you the other day that's bent. We're going to have to figure out what we want to do about that as far as what parts we want to buy. The steering that's on it's what's called a light duty half-ton steering, and then they make some heavier duty 3/4 ton. And some of the parts for the light duty are becoming hard to get. The good news is all parts for these square bodies are pretty cheap, really, so I'm going to get a clean one. Hold on a minute. Just clean that up. And now we want to make sure we're not spinning the U-joint, so if you look right in there, you can come around there and see that U-joint right there? See, it's not spinning. So now we're going to lock the hubs in. The hubs are locked in. Now it's spinning. So, and if you come around on the other side, I will show you what I mean by that little tab, because I believe Sue has, oh, I've got everything over here. So there's that spot on the spindle I was talking about, and you can see what happens here is this nut goes on like this, and I wish you guys could smell that. I don't know what somebody put in here, but it is the stickiest, smelliest, nastiest crap. Now let's just pretend that's down preloaded against the bearing. Now we have the notch here. And we put that notch on there. And you see in my case I got lucky and it fell right on the pin, right? But if that nut was turned a little bit, you see if you look up here, it's not going up tight. So you want to make sure that you get that on there like that. And then of course this one just goes on as a sandwich. This is just a jam nut. So once you put this nut on here with some pressure, the bearing is turning against this one in here, and of course it can't turn because of this washer. This one is just there to hold it. So that's what it's supposed to look like. In our case, this one was out like that, and that washer was all loose. And I mean, it was still okay. Nothing could get apart, but it was close. So
you have a jam nut, but where's your peanut butter nut? How are you gonna make a sandwich?
Smell it. All right, guys. I think that's going to be it for this video. we're gonna go ahead and we're gonna clean this side all up, get this side back together. I'm gonna get washed up. We're probably gonna have some dinner, and then we may figure out what we're gonna do about the steering, because we have to deal with this bent. This is basically an adjustment sleeve right here that goes from side to side, and this one is really bent, as you can see. So we'll figure that out and go from there. Tires should be here, I think, Wednesday, tomorrow, which will be Tuesday for us. Sue's going to be painting some rims. So she doesn't like her rally red rims. So we're gonna take the tires off and everything to get them ready for her new tires. And she's gonna get those painted up tomorrow. So thanks for watching, guys. Don't forget to like and subscribe.